各位观众朋友们，大家好，欢迎收看 JxJ 论坛，由我 Jim 马健与我们的好朋友 Jim Noteware 为我们一起讨论这个礼拜的时事。Jim, what did you think about? Well, first of all, how are you? Been an eventful.
I'm doing fine, trying to keep up with everything that's going on. Eventful news all around us, and eventful business environment too. So.
Oh yeah,
and I gather eventful family environment for everybody as well.
I think family never stops, but with explaining the war to the kids, to watching a lot more news than average Americans ever have.
Yeah.
To really kind of have a worldview of how somewhere so far away could affect. We haven't had a real war invasion in probably 2 decades.
A long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So,
yeah.
First off, what did you think of President Biden's State of the Union address on Tuesday?
Well, I would say I was disappointed, but I had low expectations. But I was disappointed anyway. I don't think he covered any of the items that were of most concern to most Americans. And the things that he did cover, he glanced over fairly superficially. I think it was really a Democratic wish list that he talked about, and I think it was designed to appeal to not to the broad spectrum of America, and not even to his own party, but to a segment of his party, the far Democratic left.
The sad thing is, the far left is not happy with what has.
I'm cynical, but I don't know what it takes to make them happy. Even when they get everything they want, they're not happy.
Well, there's some truth to that. When you're extreme on either side, is never going to be happy because you're willing to be moderated, unwilling to accept concessions to make for the greater good. Now, what they're saying is that he did not mention quite a few things. However, I do want to point out that he did try to reach out and talk about unity as Americans. No matter whether you agree with him or not, it shows that he's not senile like everybody says. He is not reading off a teleprompter. No matter what, I'm not trying to give him credit where it's not due. He did bring up the border. He did say that it needs to be fixed. He also brought up how defunding the police is inaccurate. That does not work. We knew that from 2 years ago. It does not work.
Yeah, welcome to the party.
A little late, I think, but
and a lot of damage has been done while he's been pretending otherwise. So I shouldn't laugh. It's a very serious issue.
I get it. I mean, of course, we get it because you called it years ago. I mean, if our audience can go back, everything's online. You can go back and look at our show from last year, the year before. Mr. Noteware, Jim did not change his tune. I mean, he's been calling these things out for years, for the last year and a half. Now, what's on everyone's mind, obviously, is what's happening there, what we call the Slavic nations, Slavic race. We're starting to see the other side too, and not just what the media feeds us. We're seeing that how at the border, there's very racist, discriminatory toward African Ukrainians, African or minorities, Indian students. The Chinese students or Chinese immigrants, they're also in big trouble because they're perceived as being siding with Russia. And we see how there's disinformation from both sides. Either way, we know that Putin is in a lose-lose situation now. What is your take on the latest developments that has changed from last week?
Well, before I get to that, there's 3 huge things that I don't understand. I really don't understand. Number one, I don't understand what Putin thinks he's going to get. I understand the idea of rebuilding the Soviet empire, of taking territory, if you will. But this is a classic case of if you want it, you have to destroy it to get it. So when you get it, you're going to get a landscape and a population that is devastated, that didn't provoke anything, and it's riddled with inconsistencies, and exposes his own inconsistencies, pardon me. He says that Ukrainians are really Russians, that they're all one society, and yet he wants to blow them all up. I mean, it makes no sense. He's lying to his own army about sending them over there, making them think that they were going to do military exercises. They show up and they're expected to kill the people they thought were friends. There's so much intermingling across. So number one, I don't know what the advantage is other than expanding his power, but what's it worth? It makes no sense. Number two, I also don't understand a lot of, quote, international law, treaties, expectations. We watch every night people getting obliterated. I just don't understand why even we as the United States can't go in there to save them. This is a humanitarian disaster of unprecedented proportions. Has this kind of thing gone on elsewhere around the world? Since World War II, yes, it has. That doesn't excuse it. But we are watching people get killed for no reason, no cause of their own, right in front of us. And we're all standing on diplomatic ceremony that says, oh, we have to wait for NATO. Oh, we have to wait for something else. To me, that's absolutely an awful, awful response. And number three, if you go back to diplomacy and you go back to the wisdom of sanctions, I don't understand why everyone in the United States, I shouldn't say everyone in the United States, the leadership of the United States and the diplomatic corps of NATO and the Western Alliance in Europe are so tentative, so timid about energy. We're putting sanctions on everything except energy because we don't want to disrupt the flow of oil and natural gas from Russia to Western Europe. But in doing so, we're continuing to provide him revenue, which we're trying to sterilize with our sanctions. It makes absolutely no sense. Look, I understand the arguments about carbon, and I understand the arguments about not wanting to freeze people in Western Europe if we turn out. But this isn't a problem that came up since he invaded Ukraine. This is a problem people have been talking about for years. And we've done very little about it. And we have the immediate ability to deal with it. We can send American natural gas through LNG immediately, and we are. But we need to do a whole lot more. The whole idea of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, that's a diplomatic disaster laid at the feet of our own administration right now. Thankfully, it was never turned on. And thankfully, the German leadership has finally said it won't be turned on. But there are solutions to all of this. And the best thing we can do is to try to bring an end to this as quickly as possible. But there's a lot I don't understand. And, you know, the polite word in the diplomatic world is unforced errors. That's a very polite way of saying self-destructive behavior and decisions. And
may I provide a different perspective and to expand on exactly unforced errors?
Sure.
Since 1990, since NATO, since the Soviet Union dissolved USSR, we have promised the leadership of Russia that NATO will not expand. Russia had asked to join NATO many times to join, and they've been rejected. And instead, NATO doubled its membership. And Putin did warn the West, Europe, that, hey, if you keep adding to my borders, whether he's in leadership or not, they will have to do something. Yes, the war is wrong. Invasion is wrong. Putin is wrong. There should have been other ways to resolve. But when you talk about unforced errors, to me, the unforced errors come from Ukrainian leadership too. Yes, Zelensky is a hero now. But this is the same question with Taiwan. You're neighboring a country that you cannot compete with. This is like Mexico keep poking US, inviting Russian or China to set up base on their land, deciding to join a socialist state We're not going to allow that. That's in our backyard. But yet the leadership of Ukraine keeps poking the bear, just like in Taiwan, because they think that the West, that we will back them up. It's like challenging a bully and then not doing anything to increase your chance.
I'm not aware of any behavior on the part of Ukraine to challenge Russia in any way, and I don't believe it's valid for Putin or anyone else to say, "Thou shalt not do things outside my borders." His border is Russia. What happens outside his border is really nobody's business. It's not his business, except the people who are there.
I'm just presenting you the other perspective of what they are telling their people, whether it's true or not.
Well, what they're telling their people isn't really true either. But that doesn't excuse the behavior.
You know what Russia tells them, or China, or India, or all of these dictatorships? They'll say, "Hey, how come we can invade Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, Vietnam, Korea whenever we want? Why can't Putin defend what he believes is his backyard?" What do we say to that, Jim?
I would say two wrongs don't make a right. I don't think what we have done, other than to try to clear out the terrorism that started from Afghanistan or from Saudi Arabia that led to 9/11, other than going to clear that out for our own defense, I think our nation building in those countries was terrible. I fought against the Vietnam War right from the beginning. There was no win. There was no cause for it. There was no upside. And what we used to say is, yes, okay, Mr. Johnson, okay, Mr. Nixon, you can fight Vietnam, but you have to destroy it in order to save it. It made no sense then. And our leadership, there's so many parallels between what we learned and didn't learn in Vietnam and Iraq and in Afghanistan. And what we did in Afghanistan is a travesty as well. In our nation building, we basically destroyed the nation. And the calamity that those poor people are facing now isn't because we've impounded their funds. We could give them back all the capital that we've impounded, but it would only last a few months and they'd be in the same situation. We destroyed their economy. It doesn't function at all. Nothing. It's a humanitarian disaster. Are we dropping bombs on them? No, we're not. But we've destroyed everything that they knew how to do. It's terrible. Killing bin Laden, that was absolutely the right thing to do. They had to go into Pakistan to do it.
We didn't invade Pakistan.
No. I can't explain a lot of this behavior, and it's been under both sides of administration.
Oh, it has nothing to do with politics.
Under Republican, volleyed to Democrats, came back to Republican. Now it's back.
Oh,
to
every
Democrat.
Administration is culpable in this.
And it tells you something about leadership. It tells you who runs Washington, and it's not always the president that sits in the Oval Office. There are a lot of other forces at work.
Military-industrial complex. That's what we're saying, Jim, that the different perspective is not that I agree or not, but that's what they're saying. And that's how we can call it propaganda if you want. Now, but there's one thing we agree, like I agree with you, the way we left Afghanistan or Iraq, the way we interfered in, either way, we're not nation building. We're going there in the name of democracy. A lot of times a lot of these nations would say that we still have that colonialism mentality, okay? And they tell us, why don't we take care of our borders first? Why can't we take care of our problems with our immigrants and with our refugees first before we go so far out to deal with theirs? But you see the dilemma. One side of us do not want to interfere and repeat the same mistakes. But based on, like you said, humanitarian-wise, or based on what we promise our allies, we're supposed to help Ukraine. But are we going to shed American blood? You established that last week, that we will not. President Biden said we're not. Okay, that's a given. So these sanctions, these military aids, we know Ukraine is not going to hold much longer. I mean, the Russians are lying to their own people, but they still do have heavy artillery. I mean, they're a nation that's much larger and much more advanced with military with their heavy equipment, with their firepower.
Mm-hmm.
No one is going to get what he wants, whether that is a country that is destroyed, whether they're just overtaking a piece of land or not. This sets a precedent. As Americans, we cannot allow this to happen. Because
No.
we did make promises to Ukraine. We did.
We promised what to Ukraine?
That we will aid them. We will help them get in NATO. We will help them defend their nation.
No, I don't think we've ever said we would help them get into NATO. In fact, until very recently, they said they didn't want to become a member of NATO. I mean, that to me, that's a very false argument on Putin's part. It's a pretext so that he can say we turned things down and didn't listen to him, so that he was justified somehow in taking this action. Look, the whole history of dealing with him is one lie after another, misleading statement after another subterfuge. After a while, you just can't get it. But I don't know what his next move is. Let's assume that Ukraine falls, and let's assume that there's casualties on both sides, but let's assume that Biden is successful and he occupies the country. What's next then? Is he then going to spend a little bit of time consolidating his loss and then move westward or northward into the Baltic states, into Hungary, into Poland? Is he going to be as foolish to do that? Because once that happens, it is a completely different sphere. Or is, in order to keep going in Ukraine, is he going to resort to nuclear weapons? It's something that everybody fears and nobody is adequately prepared for, including him. We're in very dangerous times. It should never have come to this, but it has. So we have to deal with it.
I agree, absolutely. Now, another question I want to tell you, for our audience, their main concern is also China and Taiwan's relationship, because Taiwan sees itself as Ukraine and Russia is basically China. Do we think, I mean, this is dangerous, that Taiwan, instead of Taiwan should view this as an example of what would happen? Where's the help? You're talking about the risk. I mean, your country is destroyed. Your people, your culture, you're being exterminated.
Yeah, after saying that we're one people, after Putin is saying we're one people, and what we want to do
after what she also said, they're one people, right?
Yeah.
My point is, Jim, my point is this, okay, compared to these two countries. Do you want to survive as an independent state for however long you think it will last, but you're independent right now, de facto? Or are you going to keep wanting to start a war that you cannot win for Taiwan and for Ukraine?
Yeah, I think Taiwan and Ukraine are slightly different. Okay. And that Putin's objectives and what I understand to be Mr. Xi's objectives are slightly different. Xi has always said Taiwan is part of China, as he also said Hong Kong was part of China. What Putin is trying to do is reestablish the Soviet Empire, which was a collection of satellite states that were under the domination of Russia. That's a very different idea. That would be like the United States saying, okay, we're going to go take over all of Latin America. Okay. Very, very different.
Jim, Ukraine is a nation recognized in the United Nations. Ukraine is a sovereign state. Ukraine has 30 years of independence from USSR. Taiwan is not in the United Nations. There is no country named Taiwan. As a matter of fact, Taiwan is called the Republic of China. Taiwan, there's two Chinas right now. One recognized, one doesn't. So Ukraine should have more support. Ukraine is more important than Taiwan when it comes to international standing, to be honest with you. So if the Taiwanese government think that they could poke a bear and that they could fight a war and they'll survive, let's not kid ourselves. They're not going to win. Just like Ukraine's not going to win. But Ukraine was counting on NATO and the United States for assistance. It never came. So now they're facing extermination. In hindsight, whether it's through diplomatic channel, whether it's through hedging or manipulating balancing act, surviving Wouldn't it be the first course of action for a country's leader to ensure your nation's survival, and no matter what it takes? Because now there is nothing. And in the end, the Republic of China, Taiwan, it will be the same. There will be nothing. They will be destroyed. Their people will be suffering.
Well, you're making my first point, or you're partially answering my first question.
I am.
What is Putin trying to accomplish? Because you're going to kill it in order to get it, or save it, or unite it, or whatever. So what are you going to unite? The devastated wasteland and the devastated population? Again, I don't get it. On the other hand, if you say Russia is big and strong and Russia wants to take over Taiwan, and you want, or not, excuse me, not Taiwan, but
PRC, People's Republic of China.
Well, no. If Putin wants to take over Ukraine, then are you saying in order to survive, Ukraine should surrender? No, I don't necessarily.
No, of course not. I meant before it got to all-out invasion,
right?
Ukraine had ways, for example, perhaps not. You know that Taiwan threatens China. It's not one-sided. Taiwan proclaims to have independence. Taiwan claims this and that U.S. is this and that, knowing that China will not allow. Just like Ukraine is sitting, I'm going to join the NATO. Ukraine officially has wanted to join NATO. Ukraine has used Russia. It's very easy. This is what Trump did too. Blame China, win votes. Blame COVID, win votes. Or Biden, right? Blame Black Lives Matters, or use Black Lives Matter, defund the police, win votes. Well, in Ukraine, in order to win votes, you blame it on Russia. Nationalist Ukraine. Russia is the big bad bear. And it came true. Russia is the big bad elephant in the room because they did invade. In Taiwan, it's the same thing. You blame China for everything. You win votes. In return, the corruption, the graft, incompetence, rolling blackouts, collapsed economy. Basically, United Nations has admitted that this ruling party in Taiwan is corrupt and graft. You allow them to continue to be in power and weakening the state, just like what Ukraine's government has done is weaken the state because you just use Russia instead of trying to find survival. Because before Russia invaded, they are independent, they are strong, they have their own culture, their own economy. This is my point. My point is, yes, we cannot stop Putin from doing whatever he wants. But Ukraine was independent for 30 years. Putin's been in power for 20. What changed in the last few years?
Not much. Just
Taiwan has been independent for 70 years, de facto independence. What changed? How come this new party comes on board? DPP, the party that controls Taiwan, became in control 6 years ago, in 2016, 8 years ago. Before that, it was peace. Why is it suddenly this rhetoric comes? Same thing with Ukraine. Why is it before 2014, Ukraine and Russia coexisted fine? Why is it that this new party comes on? This party that's all nationalistic, all about Ukraine and having national pride. What I mean is this kind of rhetoric is very dangerous because that's what Putin does to Russians too. One great Russia, USSR, strong again. That's what Xi Jinping is doing in his country. Is one great China. Anytime you get too nationalistic, it leads to expansion of war and aggression instead of peace. That's all I'm saying. I see so many similarities. That's all. China is blaming the US. We're blaming China.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. This is on Putin, period.
Yeah. And I think there's a huge silver lining that's about to occur. Unfortunately, Ukraine may have to sacrifice itself. I think Putin's going to fail.
I hope he does.
I think that the signs are already in place that he is not going to get what he wants, both because he's weaker than he thought he was in so many definitions of weak, and the Ukrainians are far stronger than they thought. And Putin has succeeded in one thing, and that is uniting and energizing the rest of the world against him. And there's going to be, I actually think the sanctions, particularly applying against the oligarchs, and if we go the next step to energy, like I talked about before, I think it will be his undoing. I think his existing government runs a very high risk of collapsing.
I agree with you absolutely, because the oligarchs, they think about only their fortune. They got rich because of him, but they also know that they have to launder the money through England, London, through other countries. They cannot enjoy their spoils of war when they're being sanctioned. Their banks are going to fail.
And the very fact that they take so much money out and seek a safe haven elsewhere.
Do you know where the ultra rich in China takes their money? Here, or Australia, or England. Yeah. It's the same. It's the same. Yeah. And think about it. Where does the ultra rich Americans take their money? They don't take it to Russia or some other. It stays here for a reason. Now,
basically, that says that they believe their own system is unstable.
Exactly. Now, Russia is in trouble because Putin is taking Russia down with them, not just Ukraine. What Putin is doing is endangering their people, whether rich or poor, because their standard of living is going. Either way, we know dictators, they don't care about laws or decorum or manners or what happened to their people. Whatever Putin is doing is, whether his dream of USSR's might, they have proven that this Russia, this military might is a facade. Their tactics, their morale is so low. I'm actually very embarrassed for them. I'm actually shocked. And we shall see.
Yeah, I agree. Jimmy, let's pick it up next week.
Thank you for tuning in.
More every day. If you want to catch up tomorrow, we can do that every day.
Too much to talk about when it comes to war and energy prices and how it relates to us in Texas. You are the perfect person with the insight. Thank you so much today.
Let me know. Thank you, Jimmy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.